Let's talk about hemp. The 2018 Farm Bill created an entirely new agricultural market here in the United States. That market, of course, was the hemp market. But how did it do that? Soon after the bill passed, acres and acres and acres of hemp was being grown nationwide, mostly being used to produce CBD. Now, CBD is a non-psychoactive substance that's found in the hemp or cannabis plant. While hemp, cannabis, and marijuana are all the same plant, the cannabis sativa plant, this bill actually did a separate classification between hemp and marijuana, classifying anything that had less than 0.3% Delta-9 THC as hemp. So initially farming it and cultivating it for CBD purposes started to become a legal and viable option for many people. Popularity with CBD began to skyrocket, especially since it has a lot of the additional medicinal benefits of the cannabis plant. In 2019, the game changed. Starting with this company called 3Chi, you began to see products popping up called Delta-8, Delta-8 THC. Delta-8 quickly began to get the reputation of being diet weed since it's 66% as psychoactive, especially in states where recreational cannabis is still illegal. But the Farm Bill said that THC is still illegal, so how are these products able to be sold? As I mentioned before, the Farm Bill actually used the Delta-9 THC as a dividing line between what hemp and marijuana was. There are over 100 naturally occurring cannabinoids found within the cannabis plant. That, in large part, is why we have started to see a huge interest in Delta-8 on the market, because it's legally classified as hemp. It can be sold in most states. It can be sold online in most states. And even in legal states where it's not been outlawed, it's classified as a retail product. So the taxes on that are low as well. The effects of Delta-8 and Delta-9 are very similar. There are indicas and sativas and various strains of Delta-8. Soon after a market developed for Delta-8, there has been a huge increase in popularity for various alternative cannabinoids. These newly cultivated and marketed cannabinoids begin to offer a way for people to customize their highs and their reactions based off of their physiology and their desired experience. Recently, there's been a lot of controversy around these cannabinoids, specifically surrounding Delta-8 and Delta-9 THC. Now, as I mentioned before, Delta-9 THC is actually standard THC. So if you ever smoked weed before, that's what Delta-9 is. Nowadays, you might see something called THCA flower, which is actually the acidic form of THC, which is just flower. It has to be decarbed. Literally, what you do to decarb THC is you heat it up to, a hot enough temperature. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a weed farmer, so I don't know what that temperature is. Burning it is essentially what causes the Delta-9 to exist. If you just eat regular weed, you're not going to get high. Regular weed is THCA. It has to get burned in order to convert to Delta-9 to get you high. The reason for so much controversy around this plant, one, because the majority of the popularity is, of course, in states where cannabis isn't already legal for recreational use. States that refuse to benefit from the sales tax of cannabis. So it's under a lot of fire because this is the time that weed has been the most legal in the last 100 years. Individual states have been attacking it. It's federally considered legal. Another reason that it's been under a lot of fire has been due to lack of regulation, which is another problem with prohibition and not with the product itself. A third reason for the controversy of Delta-8, it occurs naturally only in small increments. So in order to profitably produce and manufacture Delta-8, they take CBD isolate and run it through a process called isomerization, which basically uses acetone or acetate and a series of lights in order to convert the CBD to Delta-8. Once it goes through that process, they extract the chemicals used for that, leaving Delta-8 isolate. Remember when I said that there wasn't very much regulation on this? Because of the lack of regulation, there could be a cause of concern for the quality control of these products, especially ones that have been converted from CBD to Delta-8, since there could be harmful byproducts that are left behind. Whenever you run a product like this, it is supposed to get a certificate of analysis. A third party analyzes the product and approves it, essentially. And you can see if there's any byproducts left behind, metals, chemicals, to make sure that it all passes this compliance. The issue arises, however, when companies aren't doing that. You might hear a lot of people talking about not buying weed from the gas station. There's a good reason for this. As a rule of thumb, I think that's a pretty safe move. However, I would never just write anybody off for that. Any reputable company will have those COAs readily available for you to look at and to make sure that it's a safe product. If you're not quickly able to find them, then you're not dealing with a reputable company, and I wouldn't touch that product. This isn't really an issue with the product as much as it is an issue with regulation. This product only exists because of the prohibition of cannabis in the first place. A huge misunderstanding that people have is because since it runs through that process, they liken it to fake weed like K2 or spice. It's really important to note that this is nothing like K2 or spice. It's still derived from the CBD isolate from the hemp plant, and as long as they have liable COAs, there should be no harmful byproducts left aside. Meanwhile, the reason that K2 and spice are dangerous is because they are not naturally occurring cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. They're harmful chemicals that bond to your endocannabinoid receptors inside of your body, so they stimulate a similar response, but they're not good for you. Don't do them. Don't touch the spice. Don't do it. And finally, the big reason that it's been under fire is because of good old-fashioned crony capitalism. With more and more states legalizing weed and making more proactive policies to actually take care of drug issues within their communities instead of this failed war on drugs, you would think that the people benefiting from that, specifically dispensaries and stuff that now have a new market, would be against prohibition politics, and for more change and reform. However, that's just not true. The laws in most of these states make it so that way there's a limited amount of bills that can be passed for people to grow and cultivate, for it to be transported, and for dispensaries to sell. So here in Illinois, if you're an average Joe like me, who doesn't have $1 million to spend on a drop of a hat, you have absolutely no chance of really breaking into the cannabis space. That means that for the most part, dispensaries in Illinois are all heavily corporate organizations. The legalization of hemp is a federal thing. In order for it to not be legal in your state has to choose to make it illegal. However, weed or cannabis, marijuana, is still considered a narcotic federally. That's why they do most of their business in cash. The cannabis market itself, especially in Illinois, does not allow for much competition, since you already have to have millions of dollars to run these operations, and the licenses are extremely limited. There's not a way for the market to grow here through much competition, and it's all heavily monopolized in the state. There's only a few companies that are basically operating in the entire state. This year, Illinois was trying to pass the cannabis, which they've been trying to pass for several years, in theory to help with this inequity in the market as well as our community as a whole. Right before the bill was voted to be passed on, according to Illinois News Joint, a ban of Delta-8 products led by support from Verano, Cresco Labs, NGW, and PharmaCann played a significant role in the disagreement on the omnibus between the Illinois House and Senate. The proponents of the ban argued that Delta-8 is a dangerous synthetic drug and needed to be banned to protect children. The supporters of the ban would not take less than a total ban in negotiations. A lot of the people that are actually in the hemp industry are first-time farmers, small business owners, small retail stores who don't have the literal billions of dollars that these big corporations have. Luckily, this bill was denied and we still have the hemp industry in Illinois, but all of the benefits of the cannabis were then also denied as well. So because of prohibition, misunderstandings, and greedy capitalism, there's actually been a huge attack on hemp. But I want to talk about some of the reasons that I like it. When I first started seeing CBD pop up everywhere, I was not interested. It didn't really appeal to me, I didn't really have these aches and pains, and if I'm going to be touching that stuff, I would rather just be getting high. But then I met Sam from Prairie State Hemp and changed my opinion on the hemp game entirely. Because of the legal loophole that was opened up in the 2018 Farm Bill, there have been so many new cannabinoids that are being farmed that you can truly customize your high. If you're already looking at different strains and how those different strains impact you, why not take it a step further and try multiple different cannabinoids? Hemp is the everyman's weed. It's one of the only ways that in the cannabis sector that the everyman can live the American dream. I grew up in a small town and I'm still in a relatively small city, Springfield, Illinois, that is heavily focused on working with small and local businesses. That has rubbed off on me in a big way. I prefer to go with somewhere local. I'm benefiting somebody in my community, even though I know I'm spending more. Unfortunately, the current cannabis market makes it impossible for you to do that. There's not really a community dispensary or a Springfield dispensary that I can walk over to that is a small business that I can support directly. Because I know I'm supporting small guys and I can get high the way I want to, when I want to, I do support hemp. And on top of that, you can buy it online. I support regulation. I support common sense regulation on hemp, making sure that it's restricted to people who are 21 and up, making sure there aren't any harmful byproducts in the product to begin with. I also know that if you have any integrity, you're already taking these business practices to make sure that your brand and your reputation and your product is preserved to the highest quality. The lack of regulation is not the hemp market's fault. That's it. That's how I feel. If you guys are interested in me doing a deeper dive and a breakdown on any of this information, let me know. Please like this video, share, and subscribe. Peace.